Why do you do what you do? Are you doing it because you want to, or are you compelled?
I think the more you can sit with that discomfort, that unknown, the uncertainty, the better. That's where the creativity drops in.
Life is learning. We get to choose how we want to learn.
I think one of the big things I would say is that it's okay to ask for help. Is your reminder to take some time for yourself, take some time away from the busyness of the world.
You're not meant to have your trauma. You're meant to heal your trauma. Are you ready to live a life with enough time, money, and energy? Have relationships and connections that delight you? Are you ready for the extraordinary life you know you've been missing? If so, then this is the place for you. I'm a best-selling author, coach, consultant, and speaker who's worked in technology for over 2 decades. I'm a leader at transforming people and organizations from operating in fear, obligation, and guilt to running off joy, ease, and love. It's time for Engineering Emotions and Energy with me, Justin Wenck, Ph.D. Today, we are talking about why do you do what you do? Are you doing it because you want to, or are you compelled? Or might you say you have a compulsion or perhaps even an addiction? So today, to talk about this kind of vulnerable, maybe tricky topic, depending on where you're at, I have an amazing guest. Her name is Rachel Warmath. She's an editor, writer, published author. And she's getting ready for her, I believe, 8th book. She's also a yoga teacher, currently based out in Utah. She grew up in Northern California. I've known her since back when I lived in the Sacramento area. She has a Bachelor of Arts in English, creative writing from Northwestern University. She is also the founder of Alive in the Fire, which is a healthy lifestyle blog and a wellness creativity community. She's very passionate about helping first-time authors share their inspiring stories and launch their books. And she also helped me as a first-time author because Rachel is also the editor of Engineer to Love, Going Beyond Success to Fulfillment. So, I've known her for 10 years. She's the editor of my book, and she's not writing. You can find Rachel walking her dogs, hiking with her husband, which this is like within the past year. And she loves to practice yoga, and she also loves to read. And you're also quite the speed reader, right?
Yes, I am a
So,
speed reader.
so welcome to the show, Rachel. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. I'm super excited to be here and chat with you today.
And I'm excited that you're on today because today, when this podcast is coming out on, it's coming out June 18th. So if you're catching this just as it comes out, you're just in time. Rachel's 8th and latest book is coming out. It's called Alive in the Fire, the journey to, The journey to inner peace and creative power, which you can find at rachelwarmath.com. We'll make sure we have the notes in the show notes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm sure we'll get a lovely little, website crawl thing. So 8 books, impressive. I'd love to say I have all of them. I definitely have a few of them. They're all amazing and all kind of very different. Like sometimes you use pictures and poetry and I got to read a little preview chapter teaser, and I do feel teased because I really wanted. I was like, "Fuck, I want some more. I want some more stuff." And if it's a mix of stories and reflections, and then also questions. So I really got that. I'm like, if anybody out there is like maybe wanting to journal, but they're like, I don't know what the fuck to write about. This was going to be the book for you, where it'll get something going because you'll go like, maybe I've had experience. And then Rachel has like all of these amazing questions. And I wouldn't suggest maybe somebody answer all of them, at least not at one sitting, but it's going to get you going that maybe you could write on and get to know yourself a little better. Because I'm a big journal, and I think you are also into morning pages. I think I caught some of your posts that, yeah, what's been your experience with morning pages, and how has that impacted your creativity and maybe your life? And yeah, welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So morning pages has been a really consistent part of my routine over the last, I would say, 2 years. Before that, it was a little less frequent. It'd be maybe more like once a week instead of every day. But I find that making time first thing in the morning when my mind is fresh, and I haven't, opened up my phone or gone on social media, it's really the best time of day to just focus and see like what ideas are there. So my journaling lately, it's kind of a mix of my to-do list and like things I need to remember and the more creative parts of my writing. So sometimes I'll just have a sentence or two as part of a piece that I'm writing. For this book that I'm coming out with, there was a lot of just, notes and bullet points to get started, and even like, mapping out the chapters and kind of thinking about which stories from my life do I want to bring into this book. And then from there, after I'd done the handwritten uh, piece of it, I could type that up and, flesh it out, expand on it more. Um, but I think just having that ritual, that daily routine, it really grounds you. It helps you like be in touch with yourself and what you're thinking about, what you need, um, before you get into the average, pace of life and all the to-dos. So I find it to be a really helpful tool.
Yeah, I've found that similarly. It's very odd because often it's like, oh, I want my freedom, and it's often through sort of these like routines where, yeah, it's like we do the same thing every day at the same, or after the same event, like waking up.
Hmm.
That's often where we kind of like find the freedom because we're doing something before a lot of other stuff gets at us. And this concept of morning pages comes from this book called The Artist Way. I can't remember the author's name.
Julia
Um,
Cameron.
Julia
Mhm.
Cameron.
She's a
Yeah.
legend.
Yeah, she's I think she came up with this like 30 years ago, maybe more. She has like a recent book called like it's like Writing for Guidance or something like that, which I
Okay.
got. And because one of the things I loved about your intro to the book is you're like, hey, use this the way you want to use it.
Hmm.
Like let this be your book, like literally like go ahead, rip out a page. And I was like, oh my God, rip out a page to a
I
book? Is
know,
that
right?
like fuck, this is it's amazing that sort of like touched a part of me that because even just to like highlight in a book or write in a book has been something edgy for me, and I've done some
Hmm.
edgy shit in my life. Um, but yeah, just to like make stuff your own. And it's interesting. So her latest book, like Writing for Guidance, I I haven't finished it because I think it's one of these books where it's like from the title and like reading 10 pages, I'm like, I get it. I can, when I'm doing my journaling, I can ask myself a question and then I can answer it. And
Hmm.
what part, because we have different parts, and maybe in us, out us, whatever, it doesn't matter, but it's amazing how like answers come. And it sounds like you get some of your creativity flowing, and it sounds like you make
Hmm.
it your own, which I love.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very meditative thing. And I do receive a lot of guidance that has just naturally evolved over time. And, I think it's in those quiet moments where you're by yourself and you make space for that, like space for just that silence. Um, I feel like that's related to how I approach the blank page once I sit down and am typing. And I know a lot of writers struggle with that feeling of like, it's kind of this void space and there's a discomfort to the nothingness, right? Like
Hmm.
on one hand there's infinite possibility, but on the other hand it's like, well, what if nothing comes? um
Yeah.
so it's just that interesting juxtaposition. And I think the more you can sit with that discomfort, that unknown, the uncertainty, the better. That's where the creativity drops in.
Yeah, because I'd be curious if, because you've worked with so many writers and you've written so much yourself, if sometimes that fear isn't what if nothing comes, it's, well, what if something comes that goes completely against everything I've thought is
Yes.
quote unquote good or allowed? Like,
Hmm.
it's like, well, what if I write? You can tear pages out of books. Like, what if?
Yeah, that's so true. I would say with every book project, there's at least one piece that's like that, where it comes in and you're just kind of not expecting it. And maybe it's like a story that you didn't think you could tell or you're not
Mhm.
ready to tell. Um, I would definitely say that this newest book, I go into some of those places where, it's new territory. It's things about me that not very many people, if any, know. And that level of vulnerability is not always the most fun at first,
Mhm.
but it always tends to be worth it because that's a self exploration for me first and foremost. And then it's also just, an allowing of my voice to come through, an allowing of my heart to be open. And I think that's really where we make lasting changes and we heal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, what's maybe something that because even though it's like I've known you for at least 10 years, because I think like
Mm-hmm.
Rachel like just like last week like sent me off of Facebook one of these do you remember when and it's like and it was this yoga hike
Mm-hmm.
where we would hike a bit and then yoga a bit. And I remember at the time, like, actually, I didn't like it. I was like, I like yoga, I like hiking, but I'm like, I don't like mixing it up like this. And
Yeah.
it might, and I like to say that it's probably more of a function of how like anxious I was at the time and that I think there's probably nothing wrong with a yoga hike, but at the time I was
Mm-hmm.
just like I don't like mixing these things up. It's just I can't handle it. But it was really it was well done. Just I'm like I don't think this is my thing.
It was different. I would agree with that. It was a little uncomfortable to teach at first too because it was so different. You're kind of switching in between how to hike and how to do a yoga pose. But it was a good experiment, I would say.
Well, yeah, and not all experiments work out or are meant to yeah, keep going. Like everybody knows chocolate and peanut butter, but not everybody remembers chocolate and talcum powder. Yeah,
Uh,
because
But,
that one didn't work out very well. But, you gotta try. So I'm
yeah.
curious, what's maybe one of the an area you got into that yeah maybe I don't even know because it's like I've definitely had my history of challenges with compulsion
Hmm.
addiction like yeah like when I was in my college days like got in I was a little bit of a late bloomer but I think once I got into drinking it was like it was
Hmm.
it was a challenge I ended up going to the I'm trying to wonder if I've talked about this but I went to the hospital 3 times for drinking when
Really?
I was in college, yeah, my 21st birthday, my
Wow.
22nd birthday, and then 2 weeks before my 23rd birthday. And so after that, I was like, well, fuck, I can't even make it to the birthdays. Maybe I take some time out and I think I went for like a year without drinking and tried a little AA, but that
Hmm.
didn't that didn't really feel like the thing for me. So I ended up kind of getting into Al-Anon, which is for the, families and friends of alcoholics. So I'd highly recommend that to anybody who's has people that have problem drinking in their lives. And then also got into therapy, a lot of therapy. Um, and so, yeah, Rachel's raising her hand. She's like, yep, therapy's great. I would agree, especially if you find the right person. So some of it is like your
Hmm.
therapist. There's a lot of things in life where it's like you almost got to treat it like, a romantic relationship. And we should kind of learn how to find the right people for these things. Because some people think like, well, you just go to a therapist and that does it. It's like, no, you got to find a good fit.
Yep. Yeah, you might have to meet a few therapists before you find the one that you're wanting to work with.
Yes.
But on that same note, I do talk about my sobriety in this book, and it's not something that I share super often, but I've noticed lately that it's really something I want to share more often. And I'm really plugged into a community here in Salt Lake City that is all about recovery. They're called Fit to Recover. They're a gym, and they also do like fitness or nutrition and community service and even like creative arts. So that being a part of that has really helped open me up to the conversation in general around substance abuse and how we navigate addiction, how we um, care for ourselves in that process. And writing that chapter of my book was quite the experience. I go into some of what it was like growing up, just seeing alcohol within my family and, that side of it. And then I talk a lot about uh, a relationship that I was in, I think 5 or 6 years ago now. And he was an alcoholic and it was an emotionally abusive relationship. So there was a
Hmm.
lot of intensity there. But
So were
interestingly,
you
like,
also drinking at the time, or
I was drinking
okay?
at the time in some ways to survive what was going on. And that was what was so interesting about doing this writing. And, as I've stopped drinking and thought a lot about why that is, when I left that relationship, at first it was easy to think like, oh, he had the problem, this was all about his drinking and all of
Yeah.
that. But
You
but
you
as I
picked you
realized
picked him though. You picked
I
him.
picked, yep, I picked him and I continued to drink after that for a little while because that was a pattern, for me
Yeah.
and a way to numb and a way to, escape, my emotions and the things that I was ignoring.
Yeah.
And
So
so,
so I'm curious, before that relationship, were you drinking much before that, or did you kind of like have seasons? Because I like when we were like actually hanging out, I don't think I ever remembered going out for drinks being something that seemed like remotely on the table. Um, but I don't know.
yeah,
I
it
know
was.
I've had seasons in my, where it's like, oh,
Mhm.
that time is no drinking. And then it's like, oh, apparently it's a season of drinking, and then oh, and it's a season of moderation. And
Yeah, it's definitely kind of been a winding path like that for me. I never was like a partier in high school or college too much.
mhm.
I went to parties here and there and drank, but I would say during that relationship is probably when the height of my drinking was, and it's not something I do anymore at all. And I am really glad to be in this place. But I do think it can have like a cyclical nature to it, and that was part of what kept me in that relationship was that it would get better and then it would get worse. And it just went around and around like that.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Like, that's one of the great things I learned, from Al-Anon, is hearing all the stories that then made it easier to see the stories. Because it's like I have alcoholics in my family,
Hmm.
and I just still remember this one woman she would just say alcoholics are liars and manipulators. It's like just what, and it's like that's what they do, and it's pretty fucking true. Yeah, someone that is super into it, that is not actively working it in some way. Uh, because there's also like, how do you know an alcoholic's lying? It's like their lips are moving. So it's like you
Yeah.
really one, it's not just, but most people actually, and oftentimes it's not malicious. It's just they don't know themselves. And
Hmm.
so always, always, always go by what somebody's behavior is. Their
Yes.
behavior tells you. And
Hmm.
sometimes the words tell you very early in the beginning, because I often find a lot of people say things like about what they've been up to recently or what their expectations are. And
Hmm.
it's amazing how much those things that someone says in like the first couple weeks of knowing them, where it's just like, oh shit, I should have listened. That was not a joke. That was
Yep.
that
That
was a
was me.
recipe for this person's life. Yeah.
There were a lot of red flags and a lot of moments of me abandoning myself, my own values, or like, the life I wanted. Um, and, seeing that from the beginning, but still not being willing to say, okay, no, I'm not going to continue forward with this person. Um, but we learn as we go.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like life is learning. We get to choose how we want to learn when we decide we want to be choosing. It's like if we want to keep our head in the sand, then we're going to continue to get buried. But at some point, we can
Hmm.
kind of go, no, 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 give me give me the shit. I'm ready. I can handle it. I want to, and we can kind of decide how we want to learn. And we can learn with friends and with,
Hmm.
good guides, therapists, coaches,
Yes.
books, all sorts of things.
Hmm.
What's um I guess what I don't know if you don't mind share, like what was it that you're just like, you know, um okay, this is enough. And then what was the thing that really shifted that allowed for the changes that sound like you're still getting to, I'm sure it wasn't easy at the time, but like you're now living with the benefit. Although I'm sure there's some people that are just like Salt Lake City, the land of the Mormons, and 4% beer. Like that does not sound like a benefit. It's like, what is this?
Yes. Yes. So it was a combination of therapy, being in a space where I had reality being reflected back to me very clearly. I started to see a little bit more clearly what was going on. And then essentially it got so bad that it was just a wake up call kind of moment. And I do share that in the book. I talk about one of the worst, what I would say what was one of the worst days of my life. Um, I felt so scared and just so unsafe myself that it was just kind of this recognition of, I'm not going to do this anymore. I literally can't do this anymore. My nervous system is so taxed that it just, it was one of those breaking points, one of those turning points. And once I made that decision and left, it was a slow change from there. That first year, really on my own, just so much emotional healing taking place. Like, obviously a lot of discomfort. I wasn't sure like how I was going to make everything work financially, just uh, personally. Like, you're just going through this really heavy period of grief and depression, trying to function, trying to continue forward. But I would say the therapy, was really a saving grace and a way for me to process everything, a way for me to find some gentleness with myself through that time. And then as I continued to make better choices and live life in a way that felt more in alignment with me, uh, you start to build some momentum, you start to gain some confidence, and um, it's just an ongoing process. That's one of the themes in my book that I really hope comes through, is just this sense of like there are ups and downs, and we heal and we move forward, but it's still an ongoing journey. Like, we're never to a finish line, really. Even if we do something like quit drinking, where we make like a huge change for ourselves, it's like there will still be another cycle that comes through, or another wave of healing, another lesson. Um, Hopefully, we can learn to not have to repeat it too many times. You were talking about those birthdays. That's kind of an interesting cycle on like a very specific time. I think that can happen. Like, we can go through something several times before it really clicks, and that's just how it is being a human.
Yeah, well, because a lot of these things that we do, it's like they're put there for a reason. I was yeah, just a few days ago, I was out walking in my neighborhood, and there was a some open houses, and so I
Hmm.
went into this one, beautiful, right on the ocean, beautiful view of the ocean, and it was originally like a one bedroom, one bath, but the previous owner like added a bedroom like
Hmm.
into the garage, and it's like go in and it's like, oh, there's like a cool like bunk bed here, and it's there because the guy actually wanted enough space so he could park his car and get it into the garage. So there's like a notch or a whatever for the hood of the car to make it, and then that's like we can then you turn that into a bunk bed, or it's not a bunk bed,
Interesting.
it's just a bed, it's like a raised up, so it's like it's freaking weird. It's put there for, so it's sort of like if you didn't know and you just like, oh, I don't want this bed in here, you rip it and it's like now you just have a hole into the garage and you would have
Interesting.
um and I feel like sometimes like a lot of these like, addictions, challenges, things like that, um, which is why sometimes it's like we want to be careful how we get out of some of these things because like it was put there for a reason. Like usually we don't get into numbing or trying to like bliss out or do something for no good reason. It's like usually there's some like pain or some
Hmm.
challenge, and that's why just about everything that successfully helps people more often than not involves other people.
Yep.
It was therapy or 12-step programs or coaching or. Um, I was curious if one of the challenges in your path, because it's like you've been teaching yoga for a long time, blogging, and one of the things is a little bit of like that, the identity of like, wait, no, I'm supposed to be someone that has my shit together.
Hmm.
I am, a leader. I am this and that. I'm a yogi. I'm not supposed to have problems, especially with this.
Yes. I was, it's so interesting you bring that up because I was in my recent therapy, and I've been in therapy this last year, which has been amazing.
Yeah.
I was doing timeline work where you look at a period of time. It could be your whole life, or it could be a smaller chunk of time, and you're taking note of things that happened and when, and how that looked just on the timeline. And I realized this chunk of my 20s was becoming a yoga teacher, becoming very, immersed in my practice, dedicated to my practice, starting to teach and open up in that way. And the drinking was taking place in that same time period. And, I kind of had this light bulb moment of like, wow, how interesting is that? I think without the yoga, maybe it wouldn't have been possible to do what I was doing. It was like kind of balancing out in a weird way. Um, but that's not a good pattern to have either. So just very interesting to have, yeah, these two disparate things happening at the same time in your life.
Feeling overwhelmed by the daily grind? Imagine if you could pause, reset, and truly connect with a calmer, more fulfilled you. It's not just a dream, it's absolutely possible. Hi, I'm Justin, and I invite you to discover the life-changing techniques in my book, Engineered to Love. Right now, I'm offering a free chapter complete with guided audios that have already helped so many people find peace amidst the chaos. These aren't just any techniques. They're transformative practices designed to help you love yourself and engage deeply with the present moment, without even having to close your eyes to the world around you. So join us at engineeredtolove.com/sample and access your free guided session. It's time to bust the busyness and embrace the joy, ease, and love in your everyday life. Don't wait. Start your journey to a more relaxed and recharged you today, because you deserve to live a life you love. Visit engineeredtolove.com/sample. See you there.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I've been kind of like learning that, and I've been looking back in my own life, see that where it's like, oh, in one area it's like, oh, I'm doing all this growth and all this expansion and all this learning and growing, and then yeah, oftentimes it's like then it's like 2 weeks later after the most amazing whatever, it's like, oh, just went like as far back into, the backsliding into like, let's do all the things, let's, do let's get some drinks and do some porn and all this other eat like shit. And,
Yeah.
after, a beautiful, meditative week in someplace beautiful. And it's like seeing the it's brilliant. It's brilliant to see like, oh, an average is being maintained. It's like there is just like, because I think there is something, well, it's sort of like this human will for survival,
Hmm.
that we can go beyond once we become aware of it. But it's like we don't want change. We want things to be the same. And so there's a
Hmm.
part of us, our habit brain, the reptile brain, that's doing all that work until we become aware. And then we can go like,
Yeah.
oh, no, no, no. Now we're gonna like really actually up our average. And it's often a lot
Hmm.
slower and more challenging than these big bursts that we often
Absolutely.
see on Instagram and TV, where it's just like, oh, I did the massive action and oh, I
Hmm.
lost all this and I can see my abs and now I'm financially free. I made $1 million a year. And
Right. Yeah. What interests me about those moments too is like the shame aspect, right? Shame or guilt.
ah,
Um,
addiction,
when we,
compulsion loves shame. Oh, it thrives
right,
off it.
when we backslide, what is the response? Like if it is that shame response, that makes it even harder to get out of whatever that cycle is. And when you witness that in someone else too, like if you've ever had the chance to be there for someone after they've just had some sort of backslide, moment. Like if you can hold space for them without bringing in the shame, and you can just see them and just listen and be understanding, like that is just so powerful, and
Oh
sometimes I think
yeah.
we need other people to help us before we're able to do that for ourselves. um but
Oh yeah, because often in these spaces, it's like we don't have the love for ourselves that other people are capable of, and so
mhm,
it's sort of like, and the great thing about love is, there's an infinite supply. It's not like I love you, I love someone else. That's less love for me or less love for other people. It's like, nope, there's still more. There's still more, and people that love themselves, like they have an infinite supply for everyone.
mhm,
And I do find it is often easier to love other people sometimes than it is ourselves. And so yeah,
mhm.
I have found like if I see somebody else, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Well, not somebody that I'm like really close with and have a lot of
Okay.
history with. I don't know, like it's with like close family or like a loved and you're in the shit. But like a stranger. It's sometimes easy
Mhm.
like when there's no stakes when it's like, well,
Yeah.
that's why these group situations are so great with healing these types of things, is because
Mhm.
it's like, oh, it's like, yeah, if I hear this person's story, it's like, yeah, I don't think they're a bad person. Like that makes sense. Like,
Right. Yeah, you have empathy for them, and they can be seen, in their whatever state they're in, whether it's positive or negative. Just having that community aspect is so helpful.
yeah, and it's kind of like it's a learning and growing. And sometimes we just need to see these things from enough angles before we go, that's enough of that.
Hmm.
Or or just like, hey, you know, because let's face it, sometimes these things they can be enjoyable, but it's like, is there a compulsion? And
Hmm.
sometimes and avoidance can become just as tricky, as slippery of like, well, I'm not going to do that. And I think sometimes that's the challenge of things like Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, for some people, like, yes, probably that's the way to go. Yet in some
Hmm.
ways, it's like there's still a fixation, a compulsion related to alcohol, just instead of needing to have it, it becomes needing to avoid it, for the rest of the
Hmm.
life. And I kind of reminded of, I think there's like some old story of like two monks like walking, and they've come across a woman who like needs help crossing the river. And so the one monk just goes, yeah, hop on my back. I'll, take you across. And, they get across, sets her down, and, they're walking. And the one monk, 2 miles down the road goes like, I can't believe you just did that. We took a vow to, have no contact with women. And,
Oh.
um, and you just let her, jump on your back and take her across the river. And then the other monk goes like, well, I let her go back at the river, but you've been carrying on to this, all the way back, that like, since it's like, who's holding on to, a story, a pattern, a challenge.
Hmm.
um so you know in some ways, like the total avoidance of something, it's hard and it's also easy, whereas sometimes
Hmm.
being able to uh yeah, dabble in the areas of gray, of nuance and things like that is
Hmm.
a whole other level.
Yeah. Yeah. What amount of a grip does it have on you, and how is it affecting your mind, right? Like if your mind is obsessing over something, you're not necessarily free of it yet. That's,
Yeah,
yeah, the gray
yeah,
areas. I think that's
yeah.
a great thing to be aware of, that there are gray areas, I know
Yeah,
sometimes.
there's yeah, because it's like kombucha, like, because even non-alcoholic kombucha often has like 0.4%, because I think it's something like
Hmm.
0.5% is the threshold for something to be considered alcoholic or not. So like, can you have kombucha or not? Like,
Hmm.
like there's gray areas. There's fucking gray.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I guess so maybe let's like flash forward, like looking in retrospect. Um, yeah, like how do you see that period of your life now? And like, is there anything like you wish you would have known, or wish, if you were with you, if you now were with you then,
Hmm.
and you could also bring along future you, because let's make this even more complicated. what would you say to you then, who's also the you of the little girl that grew up so long ago?
Hmm.
I'm making this
Yeah,
overly complicated, but
I get where you're going with it. So I'm just gonna go with that.
this is why Rachel's a great editor, because she can cut to what the essence of something is and go, how about this? Maybe you say it this way.
Exactly. Um,
So
I
let's do a
think one
little
of the
live editing.
Yeah, I think one of the big things I would say is that it's okay to ask for help. You know, there was a big part of me that knew throughout that, abusive relationship that something was wrong and I didn't want to be there and I didn't feel safe. And I even think that some people around me were seeing some of that go on, but maybe didn't know how to bring it up because that's
Hmm.
uncomfortable, or it didn't feel easy for me to say, oh my gosh, I need help. Like, I need to get out of this situation. Um, and even the same with drinking, like, when you can feel a pattern starting to go down a certain direction, and like, okay, this is getting worse, not better. Or, I think I'm maybe a little bit out of control here, or, whatever that is. If you can ask for help, that makes a big difference. And I think, there's just this strong, stubborn part of me that's hyper independent, that wants to figure it out on my own, that wants to be, like you were saying, put together. And so it would be a sign of weakness to ask for help. And so, yeah, in the last, I would say, 10 years, I've really come to understand that and gotten to a much better place of being able to say, like, hey, I need help with this. And recognizing, like, there's so many amazing people right around me who want to help. But if I'm so stubborn that I'm not willing to ask for it, how do they know that they need to help me?
Yeah. And I think there's this myth of, American independence, of just you do it on your own, like the
Hmm.
settlers did. And it's total complete bullshit, because the most successful people, they have so much help. They have teams of people advising them, doing stuff for them, all this thing. So this illusion that, I was on food stamps and welfare, nobody helped me. Um,
Hmm.
that's like a Craig T. Nelson quote that I find the greatest, of just ignoring like the help that we're always getting, even if we don't think we're being helped. It's like I didn't create the roads that I drove on to,
Right.
drive, even though I'm doing this from home, so I didn't actually drive yet today. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say that notion of your team. I've learned to embrace that. Like, I think about that sometimes, like, who's on my team, and I think about it in terms of wellness too, right? Like, all the self-care activities that I do. I have a therapist that's huge. I have a massage therapist who I go to, and I've built trust with her. And you know, a session with her leaves me feeling so different after I leave. I have a chiropractor. Those kinds of things. Like, you find yoga teachers that resonate with you, or just,
Yeah.
all those people are on your team and you can lean on them. That's, I think, a really important thing. It's not a weakness.
Yeah.
It's a strength to have those.
No. Yeah. And I get a month ago I had like my physical, and the I don't well, she wasn't a medical doctor, but I'll still say she's a doctor. Whatever her letters
Hmm.
after her name were, she was like, and do you have because there's some aspects where it's like, I live on my own, and there's, but she's like, oh, what's your support system like? I'm like, well, I have a therapist, I have a coach,
Hmm.
I go to a chiropractor, and I also have like a really good friend that I meet with once. She's like, oh, okay, that's good to hear. And I'm like,
And
yeah, that is good.
that's great that she asked you that question, because I feel like that's not even necessarily something we would always talk about with someone in Western medicine. They would just be like, what are
Yeah.
your symptoms? you know,
Oh yeah, well that's
Whereas,
why I got this recommendation for it's called One Medical. They're kind of nationwide, but in certain urban centers where it is like trying to be like a
okay.
more holistic. It's
Is it
something like
like a subscription or a membership?
It is, and
Yeah.
it's associated with your favorite Amazon, but it's like $9 a month.
Huh.
And which I'm like, oh, because like I was trying to make an appointment with another doctor, and it was literally like I'd have to go through like 5 trees on the thing, and then I'd leave a message, and
Mhm.
then they would get back to me at some point, and I'm like, this is awful. This is like not human.
Mhm.
Whereas
Yeah,
this is, yeah,
we need to be thinking proactively and have those relationships established and have that trust so that when we're feeling unwell, we already have the support in place. But yeah, it's a
yeah.
challenge with the system that we're in to do that.
'Cause- Well, because one of the things is that however we're living our life is being supported. We always have a support team, just it might be the unconscious like shit support team um that wants us to be how we are because that lets them be how they are. And so some people they're not going to say anything because like well they don't want to rock the boat. They like the status quo. They don't want it. And it's actually a really annoying when one of us changes and wants to grow, which is why I've been so happy that I've cut out a lot of people. So it's who do you bring in, but it's also who do you cut out. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that I've cut out of my life. But then there's some people that I think they're like patient and loving and they don't tell you because they know that you wouldn't fucking listen anyway.
Hmm.
But then when you do, they're like, oh, okay, you got it. This is brilliant.
Hmm.
I think it's like a loving parent with a child that's like, they'll eventually want to use the toilet. But I'm not going to get angry at it. Like, I'm going to offer when, I don't know. I don't have any kids. You don't have
I
kids,
don't,
right?
no, I don't.
Yeah. I think you've been
But
around kids more than I have, but
yeah, timing is everything, right? Like, yeah, we can only make a change when we're ready. And yeah, having that patience for others and for ourselves. It's always a challenge, but
yeah. And I'm getting better and better, but I'm the most impatient with myself. Like I can definitely be better
me
with
too.
others. But as I've gotten better with myself, I've also been getting better being patient with others, which has
Hmm.
been really awesome for me to see. So I'm super excited to like read about this in your upcoming book, Alive in the Fire. I like how you also explained the birth of where Alive in the Fire came from.
Hmm.
So we're not going to go into that, but it is in the book. So if you're wondering like why is that? Because I think it was one of those things where it was like, yeah, I don't know, it just seems yoga-y, sure, why not? Because
Hmm.
you've had this brand for it's like 12 years now. How long?
Yeah, it's been 14 years now, I think. Um,
Wow.
yeah, right around the time I graduated college, I started practicing yoga. I started blogging, and those things led me to wanting to become a teacher. And
Of
um,
yoga.
mhm,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Rachel can't teach about anything else, only yoga. No, I'm kidding. There's a lot of stuff. Because I don't know, there's something where it's just like I always just go to like when someone just is like teacher, I just immediately think school teacher
Oh, yeah,
of
no, I'm not
some
a school teacher, but
no,
I
great
would say
yoga
I'm like
teacher.
yoga teacher, writing teacher, starting to really lean more into that side of it too.
Yeah. And so if someone wants to get in contact you with that stuff, they should probably go to your
Hmm.
aliveinthefire.com, get on your great, amazing mailing list.
Yes.
So definitely advise that. But if they want to check out the book, which you go into some cool things, not just about, sobriety and addiction, but like, getting in touch with the body. I think you also talk about running,
Hmm.
um, that they want to go to, rachelwarmath.com.
Correct.
RachelWarmath, warmath.com.
Hmm.
To go there, that's where the book's going to be available starting today.
Hmm.
Today, if you're listening, watching on June 18th, it'll continue to be available after. But if you're somehow
Correct.
listening to this before we're putting it out, then it won't be there. And that would be
Hmm.
odd that you somehow stumbled upon. But well, why should they go there right now? What's
Yep. So they can visit my website to learn more about the book. I've got some information there about why I wrote it and what you will gain and learn from reading it. Like Justin was talking about, it is, my stories, but it's also an invitation to the reader to explore their own story, to ask some of these deeper questions that help us know ourselves and trust ourselves more. And so it's an interactive experience through the book. And then if you do purchase the book, you'll see an invitation to connect with me in another way through a monthly physical newsletter that I'm launching as well. And that is called Move, Right, Heal. And it's just centered around this concept that's in the book, about how there's this intersection between wellness and creativity. And as we, move our bodies and also do creative activities, we really amplify our healing journey. And so all of that working together is kind of this space that I've been in, of just wanting to bring together, mind, body, and spirit, all of it. So I
And
hope
when
you'll
you
check
say
out.
physical newsletter, you're gonna like
Mhm.
there's gonna be like a CD or a USB stick that then I can put that into
It's
my computer and I can
Nope,
view the PDF. Is
it's
that
analog, so it's printed paper, um, that you'll get in the mail delivered to your doorstep.
so
Um,
it's a floppy disk, like or a magnetic tape that
it's a
what
paper.
is paper with
So part of
wow.
the inspiration there is, we're all sucked into this digital world all the time. We have so many emails that come through. Maybe we're on Substack, we're reading things left and right. But I don't know if you experience this. Sometimes it's easy to get distracted and not really finish what we're reading, like not really dive into that in the mindful way that happens when we have a book open before us or a magazine, something physical and tangible. So the idea is to engage in that reading and learning process every month, right? And
Hmm.
hopefully it's special. Like it's this thing that arrives in the mail that is your reminder to like take some time for yourself, take some time away from the busyness of the world, and to stay connected with me and all the things that I'm here to teach and share.
I love that because yeah, I've been appreciating more like, having some analog stuff. Like I've
Hmm.
been reading the Dune books. Like
Oh, cool.
yeah, like I enjoyed the movies and then I started getting into the books. I'm on the fifth book.
Wow.
Um, because the original author, he wrote six before he died, and then his
Okay.
his son continued. There's like 18 more books that like his son did with like another
Really?
author. Oh
Huh.
yeah, it's a whole
I don't know
um
anything about that series, but yeah, that sounds incredible. If you,
oh yeah, it's good, and there's a lot of stuff in there where it's like talking about, the dangers of technology and all sorts of things where it's just like
Hmm.
it's like this guy was like predicting the future in some ways. Apparently, he did a lot of
Wow.
psychedelics, and
Okay.
I think it shows. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's like I have, paperback books, and it's just so nice to just read those and get into it, instead
Mhm.
of having, distractions and notifications if I was to try to do it on an electronic device. So I love that. And I think we're going back to the future, a lot of this stuff, because like vinyl's big. I was able
Mhm.
to get my dad a record player and a Creedence Clearwater Revival vinyl record
Uh,
for his birthday, and I think it was like the best gift I think I've ever gotten him in my entire lifetime.
that's so fun.
Because
Yeah,
I
there's
thought,
something
yeah,
to that vintage, that throwback kind of feeling. It's nostalgic, but it's
yeah,
also mindful in a way because it's taking you into that present moment.
hmm,
Um, I feel like the pace of technology, whether I'm on my phone or the computer, can just be so fast where it's like you're bouncing between things. But something that you're holding in your hands, or like you said, the record, you set the record carefully on the thing and then you
hmm,
start it. It's so different than, just
yeah.
pressing play.
And I think it's important to be able to do different things, especially when working with compulsion,
Mm,
addiction, because that is just the ultimate habit, and it's getting out of that habit and into something else. Because you really can't just stop doing something; you have to do something different.
Hmm.
Like we have to do something, and in the absence, we'll just do what we've done. And so to have something different, like Rachel's book or her physical newsletter, is going to make it so much more easy, so much more enjoyable, because you're going to have something to fill up your life and your time that's nourishing you instead of basically killing us and taking us away from who we are, what we're meant to do, what we're meant to enjoy. Um, and yeah, I'm so excited for this book. I only got to read the intro and the chapter, and I was like, God damn it, you fucking what a tease. What a fucking tease.
I know. I was wrapping up the edits right as you asked for that sample, and I'm like, I'm not ready to send him the the darker parts because there is some darkness in the book, and it's like I just want someone to be able to read, start to finish all the way through that with the proper trigger warnings and, like be ready for it. So yeah.
Sometimes I find trigger warnings triggering.
I yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Because I think there's a little bit sometimes of well, and especially when you're in these kind of like mindful conscious communities where they're actually run by a lot of unconscious people. Um,
Yeah, well, and there's
where
the bypassing element, right? Of like, okay, instead of being triggered, I'm just going to skip.
Yeah, because I was just thinking it's like um you're not meant to have your trauma, you're meant to heal your trauma. And if something like brings that pain up, it's again, it's like you want to sort of choose how you work it, but it's like it's gonna get fucking worked. So
Yes.
you can't just avoid it, and you can't ask the world to change for you. So it's you got to modulate somewhere in between. And when other people are just doing what they're doing, like and
Hmm.
that bothers you, that's a you problem. That's not the rest of the world. Like there's stuff that like um I don't know. I was really thinking about how, especially with this election season, how when people hear news about, they get so upset, and it's just like, well, just stop following anybody that talks about, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Don't, and then that the guy comes up on the news, you change the channel, and eventually you're that person's just not going to be an issue anymore because it's like probably you hear about this person all the time, like they're in your feed, they're in your news, they're in this other, and
Mhm.
you all know who I'm talking about, right? Everybody knows who I'm talking about because
Yeah.
everybody has that person that bothers them.
Right.
Yeah, so but every like different people would be filling in the blank with whoever bothers them. It doesn't matter who's running for president. There's
Hmm.
someone who hates one of those three fuckers or all three of them, and
Yep.
they filled it in. Um, And I don't really care too much about any of them. Like, yes, I will vote. I will go for the one that annoys me the least, but I don't need to
Hmm.
share that here. Um,
Yeah. I think as far as the book goes too, it's like, yeah, you want to give people tools and a framework and a reminder to use the book in a way that works for them. But ultimately, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what people's reactions are. And I know, even just having family members read this, it feels very vulnerable because
yeah,
these are experiences that I've had that maybe they'll have a different take on, or they just won't even have known that I went through some of this. So it's like, oh, that's kind of a little bit scary to put that out there, but
yeah.
not a reason not to, I think.
I'm so happy you're putting it out there because, like, I don't know, you have an amazing heart. You have such an ability to communicate, and I know it's going to help, lots of people to get into these um challenging aspects of life
Hmm.
that they're there and they happen and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And it's like, bringing the light into the darkness because I think
Hmm.
we all have our dark times, our dark thoughts. Like I was just thinking how much in life sometimes feels like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football from
Hmm.
Lucy, and she would just, pull this is like back in the era of the vinyl records even. And Charlie Brown would take the run up to the football, try to kick it, and she would take the football away at the very last minute, and he would just stumble and hurt himself.
Yeah.
And he would get frustrated, and she would just say, like, "Oh no, this time, Charlie Brown, I'm gonna do it." And the dark thought I had recently was like, Charlie Brown should just tackle and just fucking have at Lucy and just show her what's up and just play a different game.
That's a different version of the cartoon, I guess. But we
That's
all do have those moments. Yeah. Whether
yeah.
it's someone else doing that to us or us doing it to ourselves, you know.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, I think we're all ultimately doing it to ourselves because I think,
mhm,
as we were mentioning earlier, and it was like it's so easy. That's the thing is it is easy to blame other people because then we're not seeing our part in it when
mhm,
really once you're an adult, it's like you're choosing to continue what was put on you. Like, yes, some shit was put on you against your will when you were younger, but once
mhm,
you're an adult, it's fucking hard, but there are ways to shift. And I'm not saying it's
mhm,
easy. I'm not saying stuff's not stacked against people, but it becomes possible. And when you go
mhm,
like, oh, it's possible, I can do it. And I think that's what's awesome about your book is it's one of these like ways to show that it is possible. Um, and that even when it looks like we have so much going for us and that things are so good, that there's always problems, there's always challenges. And I love this
mhm.
kind of like showing more sides of yourself because we all have these sides. And I'm so happy to know you and to get to know you even better. And I definitely recommend people go get the book today, rachelwarmath.com. Check it out, especially, get the real deal, the paper one, rip out
Mhm.
pages,
Yep.
write notes, highlight. Any last words, Rachel?
Just a thank you, thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for being an awesome friend and, colleague over the years. I'm really grateful to have been able to work on your book as well. That's a book that's changed my life. Some of the writing
Oh,
prompts and just ideas you have in there, I think have a similar feel to some of what's in my book in the sense of like, it's something that's really helped me and transformed me. And it's a fast way that could potentially, help change someone else too. Um, so I would just echo that, back to you. Like if anyone reading or anyone listening to this podcast hasn't yet read Justin's book, I highly recommend it. And yeah, I think just, keep owning your story, right? Like both of us are examples of how you write a book, and that's a huge step towards knowing your story and owning it and sharing it. And that's such a powerful place to be.
yeah, I love that. And yeah, once you own it, you can start actively writing it and not just be a
Mhm.
a passive participant in a movie. You can be the author. You are, whether you know it or not. It's just, are you going to choose to
Yes.
um, radically shift up the story, have your own twists and turns instead of just waiting and hoping something happens? So,
Mhm.
thank you so much. Great having you on. And yeah, rachelwarmath.com for the Alive in the Fire book. Like, check it. Go get it right now. Right now.
Awesome. Thank you
Okay.
guys.
Thanks. With that, thank you so much and good day. Thanks for tuning in to Engineering Emotions and Energy with Justin Wenck, Ph.D. Today's episode resonated with you? Please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Your feedback not only supports the show, but also helps others find us and start their journey of emotional and energetic mastery. You can also help by sharing this podcast with someone you think will love it just as much as you do. Together, we're engineering more amazing lives.